Let's think of a scenario. You are a database developer and you are part of a team that is building a software application. And in your project, you have multiple environments, like you have a development environment, you have a test environment, and then you have a production environment, typical of any software development lifecycle. And let's say in your development database, you have some volume of data and you have developed some queries. They could be plain SQL queries, or there could be functions, or maybe even procedures. You have tested them against the development environment. Everything works well. But somehow you do not have the confidence to take these queries to production. And the reason is you have the fear that what if the queries run slower in production? If this has ever happened to you, then you're not alone. Most database developers have this fear, which is the queries that you create and test in development may not work with the same performance, let's say in the test environment or the production environment. And the reason is in most projects, the volume of data in production is way higher than the volume of data in development. So there is no guarantee that a query that takes milliseconds in development will take the same amount of time in production. Hi, I am Bindu Kumar and I welcome you to my channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can generate mockup data. So what is the use of this mockup data? You see, mockup data is the data that you synthetically generate in order to test your queries in lower environments. And this is the problem statement we started with. So how can we solve this problem? The only way to do that is to generate as much as volume of data as it is in production, but in development. And in most projects, they do not allow copying of production data into development. You will have to create your own data. And that's what this video is about. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can generate random data in your development environment using Postgres database as our database of choice and a Python library. So let's get started. For you to follow along in this video, there are only two prerequisites. One, you need to have Python installed, and then you need to have a Postgres database. But don't worry about Python. You don't have to do any programming. You just have to install two libraries and then just run a command line utility, which I will show you step by step. And the other thing, you need a Postgres database. In case you do not have a Postgres database up and running, you can spin one using a Docker command. So these are the steps that we'll be doing today. We will be installing a library called fake2db. This is what is used to generate the random data. And then we are going to run that fake2db library by pointing it against a Postgres database. We are going to review the kind of data that it generates. And finally, we are going to look at what are some of the pros and cons of using this library. The very first step is to install the Python library. In order to do that, let's create a folder. So for all experimental purpose, just let's create a separate folder. We don't want to disturb any of the existing folders. So here you can see I've created 44 how to generate fake data for Postgres. And let's start a command line right in this path. So here we are going to use the Python command python -m create a virtual environment, and we'll call it datagen. Now this will take a minute, and you can see in the background there is a folder that has been created now, datagen, and some files will be created. But we don't have to get into that at the moment. Okay, so there you go. The virtual environment has now been created. Let's switch to that virtual environment by giving the name of the folder /scripts. That's the subfolder name, and then the command is activate. So by doing this, we have switched to the Python virtual environment that we just created. And in this virtual environment, we are going to install the fake2db package. And the command to do that is pip install fake2db. Now you'll find all these commands in the video description, so you don't have to take any screenshots or anything. This might take just a minute. Okay, so as you can see, it is completed. Now the next thing we want to do is there is one dependency that you need to install, which is the psycopg. Since we are connecting to a Postgres, this library is very much required. So pip install psycopg2. This also should be done within few seconds, and there you go. So now we have all the necessary libraries installed. Now before we run the command, let's review the database. Let's look at what is there in the database already. So I brought up my dbeaver, which is a database client, and here you can see I've connected to a Postgres database running in a Docker container. It's running on 5432, and these are the three databases that are currently available: DVD rental, init, and Postgres. But we are not going to use any of the existing databases. Instead, we are going to create a new one. So let me minimize this for the moment and come back to the command line. Right here, we are going to issue the command, and let me actually type the command in a notepad and then copy it. So here, the command will be something like this: fake to db. This is the utility. The first parameter is the number of records you want to generate. So let's start with 10, right? So it's quick and it's easy for us to analyze. So we want to generate 10 rows, and then we want to mention what type of database it is. So it is the PostgreSQL. So it's very important we mention what is the kind of database, because fake to db supports multiple databases including PostgreSQL, MySQL, Oracle, and many other databases. So it's important we mention what type of database it is, followed by the connection parameters. So we'll have to mention the host name, the port, and then the username, the password. Okay, so let me just wrap it. Yeah, right. Password, and then we'll have to give a name to this database. We will call it Mockup data1. Right. So let us quickly review it. The utility or the command name. The first parameter is the number of records. The second parameter is the type of database it is, and then the connectivity details, which is host, port, username, and password, and then the name of the database that it should create. So let's copy this command and take it to the command prompt, and just right click here, hit enter. So this should take few seconds, and as it progresses, you can actually see the status. It will create a couple of tables. All right, there you go. So let's look at this error message. You can see the time it started and the time it ended, and you can see some of the arguments appear here. So the number of records is 10. So the database has been created, and then these are the tables that have been created: simple, detailed registration, companies, and I think the customer. And there must be one more table, I believe. All right, let us check the database. So I'll bring back the dbeaver. Please make sure that you refresh the list of databases, and there it is. So a new database has been created, and if I expand it, you can see 5 tables that have been created: company, customer, detailed and simple registration, and user agent. So if I were to right click on company and view data, you can see 10 records, and that is the number of records that we mentioned. Let's open up user agent. Okay, user agent is blank. I'm not sure why, but let's look at the customer. All right, so here as well, you can see 10 records. Now, let us run the same thing. This time, we will run it for maybe 100 records. So there are only 2 parameters I'm changing. I'm changing the number of rows to 100, and then I'm changing the database to mockup data2. Hit enter. All right, so it's completed. We'll refresh, and here is the new database, mockup data2, and then if I expand, you can see the data here. And if I scroll down, you can see there are exactly 100 records in the company table, and you can expect a similar thing in the customer table as well, 100 records, right? So this is how easy it is to generate the mockup data, and we generated 10 records and then 100. I have tested it up to 1 million records, but please remember, this data is being generated on the fly, right? It's not, let's say, coming from some kind of a database. So it takes time to generate, and it definitely eats up your system resources. So you have to be mindful of that. When you run this command, you need to allow it the time it needs to complete. So this is how fake to DB works. I mean, these are just the sort of the initial commands. Now let's review this data. Now if you look at the data, every time we ran this command, let's review the command, right? Every time we ran the command, we only mentioned the number of rows and we mentioned the connectivity details and the database name. But we never mentioned the schema. We didn't mention how many tables, what table, what attributes in the table, none of that, right? So, but still this fake to DB generated these 5 tables, which are company, customer, detailed, simple, and user agent. So how is it doing that? It's doing that because this fake to DB library has its own default schema. So when you do not mention a schema, it generates data based on its own schema, right? And that's what you're seeing here. Although this is good for getting started with, it definitely does not suit most of our requirements, because when we want to use this in our own project, we have our own schema, we have our own set of attributes, and this is simply not useful there, right? So what is the solution for this? How do we make fake to DB generate data for our schema? So for that, there is an additional parameter that you need to pass. So let me copy this command in the notepad, and here what we are going to do is we are going to pass an additional parameter. The first thing we will do is we will change the name of the database to mockup data 3, because like I said, you cannot write to an existing database. So this is one limitation that fake to DB has. It cannot write or append to an existing database. It always creates a new database. Hopefully this will be fixed in the future, but for now this is what you have to live with. So I'll say mockup data 3, and then here we have to use a parameter called custom. And now I will mention some attributes. I'll mention UUID4, name, and email. And let me add one more attribute, which is country. So I've added 4 attributes: UUID4, name, email, and country. Let's copy this and run it. Okay, so it completed successfully. Let's go back to dbeaver. So you can see a new database is created, and this time there is exactly one table that's created. It's called custom, and if you look at the data, there will be 3 attributes: name, email, and country. Sorry, 4 attributes, UUID included as well. But the fake to DB, it also adds a primary key column called ID, right, which is auto generated. I mean, I did not have to specify that. So UUID, name, email, and country, these are the 4 attributes that it has created. Now what we'll do is let me drop this entire database, right? I'm just going to delete this database mockup data 3, and we will rerun the command, but this time we will give it 1000 rows. All right, so if you look at the database now, you can see the table size is already a little larger than before. And when I click on view data, you can see it's a lot more than 10 records. It's 1000 records now, right? So this is how you can generate data sets where you decide which attributes to add. But some of you may be thinking, how did I give these attributes? How does fake to DB know that this is a UUID, this is indeed a name of a person, and it's not a name of a product or something. So where is this coming from? Well, this is not something that I'm giving. I'm actually giving it as from a list that is pre-decided by the Fake2DB developers. And let me show you the page. Right. So this is the GitHub page. You will find the link for this in the video description. This is the GitHub repository of the Fake2DB project. And if I scroll down, you will see a link here, which is custom.py. If I right click, open it in a new tab. And if you scroll down here, so these are the set of attributes that are available. So it's not like Fake2DB can generate values for any and every attribute. It has a list of attributes from where you can pick. For example, you can generate passwords, you can generate currency code, dates, and so on. Okay, so as long as you pick an attribute from this particular list, Fake2DB can generate data that is of that pattern. Like for example, if I select longitude, then it's going to generate values as per that pattern of longitude or latitude. Similarly, the month, year, zip code, and so on. So this is how Fake2DB works. Now to conclude, Fake2DB is it's a very simple and straightforward tool to use. You just point it to your database. You can generate the default schema, or you can generate data as per the schema that you define. The only limitation being that it can only generate one data set at a time, which means if you need 3 tables, you will need to run the Fake2DB program multiple times. You need to run it 3 times, as simple as that. That's one. The second thing is the number of rows it generates, right? Of course, the more records you need, the longer it takes. But the last one is what may not be suitable for all of us, right? Look at the values that have been generated. You see the name and you see the email, right? It says Philip Miller, but the email says David91, right? Similarly here, it says Christina Tran, but here it says Glenn13. So the data that is generated is not exactly associated with each other. It is disconnected. And this is let's say the feature of most data generation tools. You don't get data that's associated with each other. So this is something that you have to look out for, because if this is something that, let's say, affects your logic, the queries that you're going to try, then you have to find some other way out, right? But this is mostly for generating a random set of data where association is not really, it really doesn't matter. Okay, so this is Fake2DB. Now, one other thing. Here, you are generating one table at a time. But none of our, in a real world, most of the schemas, they are not a set of isolated tables. You have tables that have relationship between them. You have primary key, foreign key. And this, I know, is a deal breaker for many of us. I mean, we want to be able to generate data, not one table at a time, but the entire schema at a time, right? Unfortunately, Fake2DB is, falls short there. I mean, it really doesn't support that. And as you see, it's a very simple tool to use that can be used for, let's say, performance tuning, doing some kind of benchmarks and so on. But it really doesn't help in terms of logic, in terms of custom schema and so on. So what's the answer for this? So for this, there is another tool which is much more sophisticated, needs a lot more setup. Definitely, it's not as simple as Fake2DB to use, but of course, with more sophistication and more flexibility, you also get that complexity of setting it up and doing that initial configuration and so on. So is it something that you want to see how this other tool works? Then the only way for you to do is stay subscribed to my channel. I will be uploading a video on that new tool, which I'm not going to reveal the name right now. So stay subscribed. You will be notified when I upload the video. I'll be doing it in a couple of days, and there we can see how we can generate data for an entire schema, not just one data set at a time. But meanwhile, for for most of you who are just starting with this mockup data generator, this should be pretty good to begin with. Alright, so with that, we come to the end of this video. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer them. And remember, a lot of effort has been put in to create this library. So let us, go to their GitHub page and, give the repository a star. They definitely deserve that appreciation. Thank you for sticking till the end of this video. By the way, this video is also available in Kannada, so you can click on the link in the video description. If you found this video useful, please remember to like the video, share it with your friends and colleagues who may be looking for ways to generate random data. It could be developers or it could be testers as well. So please do share it with them, and of course subscribe to my channel. Thank you and see you in my next